I'm Haley from Gallifrey Public Radio, a Doctor Who fandom podcast and part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Talk hard and enjoy the mindgasm. The Intellectual Podcast starts now.
Welcome back to the Intellectual Podcast. I'm your host, David S. Dawson. As usual, I want to thank you for joining us. Your patronage of the show is why we continue to make them. We're approaching the end of our 6th season, and we might be doing something special about that later this year. I will let you know as things develop. On this week's episode, we interviewed Miguel Rodriguez of the Horrible Imaginings Film Festival, now based in Orange County, but started here in San Diego. Miguel is a very good man who has a sincere love of the horror genre and has created a fantastic film festival for fans of the genre and for filmmakers alike. As usual, I want to reiterate that we're a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network at GonnaGeek.com, where you can listen to the Intellectual Podcast and a whole slew of other incredibly geeky podcasts, including the podcast All Things Good and Nerdy. And this week, Peter G., a.k.a. Sailor Poland, joins the show to share the latest rumors from the set of Doctor Who. Meanwhile, Chris has the details about The Boys beating Amazon's projections, and Willie describes the latest shadiness to come out of MoviePass, and Anthony gives the background on Disney's plan to disrupt Netflix with Disney Plus, which now has a launch date of, I think it's November 12th. So in November, we'll be looking at getting The Mandalorian. That'll be one of the shows to kick off the Disney Plus streaming service. So a lot of information there. But you can check out that episode of All Things Good and Nerdy at GonnaGeek.com. And while you're there, check out all the rest of the shows that are around. There's some really great stuff there, including shows that'll help you become a podcaster if you're interested in becoming a podcaster. I'd also like to put my congratulations out to our friends Kristen and Jordan at the You Are Gonna Die Alone podcast. They will be celebrating their 1-year anniversary tomorrow night here in San Diego with a special live show, and I plan on being there to show my support for this incredibly fun show. If you haven't listened to it, make sure you go find it on a podcast player of your choice. The You Are Gonna Die Alone podcast with Jordan Jacobo and Kristen Chandler. And now, Whitney and I will move into our interview with Miguel Rodriguez of the Horrible Imaginings Film Festival, which you can find at hifilmfest.com. That's hifilmfest.com. Horrible Imaginings on the Intellectual Podcast. Okay, so we're up here in Orange County with our good friend Miguel. Hi.
Hi. The County of Orange.
Whitney's up here with me.
Hello.
Although actually I came up and joined you guys, really.
Yeah.
Because you guys were up here for orientation for Horrible Imagining.
Yes, volunteers. Our lovely cadre.
Horrible Imaginings. What number of years is this for you?
10.
10 years.
10 years.
You've been doing this a decade now.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
We're in double digits. Yeah. The white in my beard is proving it.
And this is the second year that it's in Orange County?
That's correct.
All right.
Well, let's get to the first thing, the big move to Orange County. Why did you make the move?
Okay.
And how did it turn out for you?
Okay. So, gosh, it's a long story. I'll try to keep it brief. You know, we had been in San Diego for a number of years. San Diego can be a tough city to gain a foothold in the arts industry and cinema in particular. But, you know, we had a decent following. We had people who were very loyal. At MOPA, we had a great venue. It's a beautiful cinema at MOPA. So we were not looking to move. That was not ever the intention. We did find out in January of 2018 that the cost of staying at MOPA was going to go up pretty dramatically. With that information in my head, I ended up attending Art House Convergence, which happens right around Sundance Film Festival in Utah. I was on a panel, and they do have a film festival portion I'm part of Film Festival Alliance. And I was approached after my panel by one of the board members of the Frida Cinema, which is here in Orange County in Santa Ana. The Frida Cinema is an older cinema, but it has recently sprung back to life. It just celebrated its 5th year under new ownership, and it's very much a nonprofit art house cinema specializing in unique films. You've seen the mural downstairs. Like, it's really, that is its personality. So it fits with us. And they came up to me and they said, hey, we really liked your panel, and we thought that you said some really great things. We'd love to invite you to come see the cinema, because we've heard lots of amazing things about Horrible Imaginings. At that point, we have been on top 10 lists. We're best reviewed on Film Freeway. Most recently, we are on the top 50 of film festivals in Movie Maker magazine, top 30 of genre-based worldwide. So we do have a little recognition from that. So I said, okay, yeah, I thought it was just an invitation to see the theater. And that's part of what art house convergence is to go and experience other art houses.
Right.
They have these regionals. I've been to theaters all over the country. I love it. But so I came and saw a film here and checked out the cinema, checked out the neighborhood. And it was actually at that meeting where they brought up moving the film festival here. Mm-hmm. Of course, they waited until after I saw how cool a theater it was.
Of course. Well,
and
the bait and then the switch.
It was a little bit. I mean, I have to admit there was some dastardly devious intent behind it. Although, I don't want to say the motive was completely financially based, because I really like this theater. I really like the family they have here. I really like the personality they have here. The Logan, who is the owner, the executive director, is a lot like me. We're both very passionate. We're both a little bit eccentric in our view of film and what it does for a community. So we have a unified vision in a lot of ways. So that is a big part of it. But I can't understate what it's like after nearly a decade of pulling teeth to have a venue want you. You know what I mean? It's pretty great. And
well, I mean, putting on a film festival is such a huge endeavor to begin with. Anywhere where you can relieve tension helps, right?
I always use this as an example of the first year we were at MOPA, where I had 3 different meetings that got pretty heated, and the entire purpose was to allow our patrons to have water in the theater, bottled water in the theater.
Right.
And this is a day that's 12 hours long.
Right.
In Balboa Park. After 4 o'clock, it's dead. There's nothing. You're fucked. I'm sorry. Can I say fuck?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. After 4 o'clock, you've got nothing.
Yeah, there's nothing at Balboa Park.
It's look, just water. It was brutal, and dealing with Balboa Park's brutal. Dealing with MOPA could be challenging.
Well, I think the problem with MOPA as a venue, it's a beautiful theater.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's essentially in a museum, right? So it's treated like an extension of the museum, even though it's an event space.
Yeah.
So there's always this weird combat between, well, it's an event space and we're doing events here. Oh, but it's still part of the museum, so you need to treat it with reverence.
Yes.
Well, I imagine
conflict.
There's probably also some necessity for the move as well, because your attendance numbers have been steadily going up every year as well. And while that's a beautiful theater, it's not the hugest capacity in the world, right?
I don't know. I don't know how many seats did MOPA have.
So 226 at MOPA, which was right at where we were. We sold out a few times. So it was perfect for that time, but it did not allow growth, and it is only a single screener.
Right.
And San Diego, if you don't have MOPA, you end up having AMC or Ultrastar. There aren't a lot of venues, right? I mean, even like Latinos at the AMC Fashion Valley now, it used to be at Ultrastar.
Right.
Largely, the Asian Film Festival is at the Ultrastar. It's still their home. And there are a couple of side venues everybody will go to, and some of their special events like might be at the Nat, right? And they will still everybody will use MOPA for something. But there, I mean, like in terms of an art house theater, San Diego only has one, and it's 46 seats. It's a digital gym cinema.
Right.
Like some people will argue the Ken, but the Ken really isn't. The Ken is a landmark. The Ken views itself as an extra screen to the landmark Hillcrest. And we lost the landmark in La Jolla, but the landmark is not an art house the way we think. I mean, it's still very corporate. It's basically the AMC. So it's really hard to get. Like they make it very difficult, to rent the Ken. I've only done it once, and it was hard and extremely expensive. And the only way it could make it affordable was my screening was at midnight, and San Diego is not the town that never sleeps. So. Yeah, I didn't do that again. So you're right. Part of it is a limit of venues. But I think it's also, just culturally speaking, the neighborhood and the community here is a little more amenable to our genre. It's a little more amenable to a horror film festival. Like, coming here was kind of like starting over. And the growth here has exceeded what it was in San Diego now after less than 2 years, So,
have you seen very many of the San Diego fans that were at Horrible Imaginings?
We do.
Coming here?
Not a ton, but we have a core group of loyalists. Looking at the tickets we've sold so far, we've got a bunch that got just for Saturday, which is great. Make the trip for Saturday. That's solid. And we've got the real core people who bought full festival passes and already have their Airbnbs. We've got an Airbnb actually where we're housing 17 people, but it's a huge Airbnb. Like it's ridiculously big. But a lot of those are like Rena, who's been coming since year one, She's one of those, like, she hasn't missed anything. And so, yeah, it's like, hey, you should stay with us at our Airbnb. You deserve it, But I mean, it's certainly not like 100 people from San Diego.
Right.
It's like the hardcore.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We had to really answer that question, we have had to create a new audience.
Yeah. So, was that a daunting idea?
Hell yes.
After, so you were in San Diego for 8 years.
8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it was brutal. Yeah. And I mean, like, it was not something I was like, yes, let's do it. I said, I don't think we will do that, but, let's keep it on the table. I'm not going to say, like, money-wise what they quoted me, but, I mean, it's, like, basically you could tell they really wanted us there. Like, they're counting on us bringing in new members that might come for the rest of the year. They're counting on us helping them sell some concessions.
Well, and that's maybe the benefit of being at an art house as opposed to a museum, right?
Yes.
The museum doesn't need you.
Right.
Because they're not doing things there regularly outside of people come see exhibits.
Bingo.
But this theater is a living, breathing theater that needs patrons throughout the year, right? So
they do.
Your event can help them and they can help you. So it's a good mutual
Logan
situation.
sees this as a partnership. Logan sees this as one hand feeding the other. Rising tides raise all ships. And so do I. I think that's where we're really simpatico. And I think, Logan's been involved with the festival. This is the first time I've ever had a venue really push our stuff in their own marketing. We're all over the front of their building. We're all over their social media. We've got a banner on their website, and they've got more social media followers than MOPA. Which is shocking, but not shocking if you ever tried to follow MOPA. So that's been huge. It's been huge to have someone actually like join forces with, not someone we're just renting from.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a big part of the move, and I don't know. It's really multifaceted. It wasn't easy. And it was something I, went back to San Diego and said, to everybody who's been working on the festival. We all sat down around the table, and I said, hey, this is what happens. And I will say that pretty much it was unanimous, yeah, you should do it. And one of the big reasons was food.
Right.
Was food.
Right.
Makes sense. And I mean, what's nice is, so we walked around doing flyers earlier today. The community here is very aware of the Frida and very open for them. They're like, yeah, leave flyers here. Tell them to come down and, enjoy food during the fest. Everybody, it is a community, and they do share the patrons.
Mm-hmm.
That's really positive. I was going to ask, because I'm sure it wasn't covered last time you were here, because you guys were talking about Wes Craven. How did this get started in the first place? Like, what? You kind of told me the story earlier, but make you tell it again.
The festival itself?
Yeah, the festival. Like, why did you decide to have a horror genre film festival? Put yourself through all this?
Yeah.
What were you smoking?
Nothing, apparently. But because if I had been smoking something, I might have stayed home doing nothing. But so I moved to San Diego from Baltimore, Maryland, and I'd always been really involved in screening films. It's a passion that is part of my education. It's part of what I like sharing. I like introducing. But mostly I like going to film festivals. And San Diego has a lot. It's got over 30. Mm-hmm. But for genre like this, there wasn't anything. I did that very summer that I moved to San Diego. I looked for one, couldn't find one, found several in Los Angeles, and I got a car and drove to Los Angeles and went to a couple. And I was like, man, I don't have to do this every time. And that was it. That's what made me start the first Horrible Imaginings, like 3 months later, which is really kind of insane when I think about it. But that year I didn't take submissions. I put together a list from films that I had seen on the circuit, friends that I knew, and it was just one day. It was at the 10th Avenue Arts Center down in East Village, and fairly humble, but pretty awesome beginning, because that's a great little venue for a really DIY event, and supposedly haunted, which gave it a nice ambiance. It's got a rooftop for parties. You guys have both been there, so I you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. But that was the beginning, and I think my vision for doing a film festival was to really make it less of an elitist and more of a breaking down the barriers between the creators and the audience kind of event. And that, I think, is why we've had recognition from places outside of the city, because we're very well reviewed. I think that's part of it. Mm-hmm. is we try to really make it more intimate, really focus on the why of making the films rather than good for you, you made a movie kind of thing, and I think that has been something that's appreciated from both the audience and the filmmakers, and the feedback that we get from that is what keeps me going. It's like, oh, I guess this is why I'm going to do it again next year. First of all, look at some of these submissions are just outstanding. I really want to share this. Ultimately, right. I really want someone else to see this with me. And it's really neat if it's a dark theater with 250 people in it.
Well, that's one of the fun things about horror is like it's best experienced with other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's necessary in my opinion. But yeah, I think that's ideally is, especially if like those people don't know each other very well, you might be there with a friend. It's like, that is an ideal situation for the horror genre.
Yeah. And so you had a nice transition point in there. The submissions. Can you talk about what that process is like? Because you guys got a ton.
We've been getting more and more every year. Partly because, I guess we have a little notoriety as a good film festival. I hope we can continue that trend. But
maybe reputation.
Reputation. I like the word notoriety, but it does have kind of a negative connotation. We are notorious. Yes, we've got a reputation, which I'm hoping to grow. But the submission process has been something that's rapidly evolved recently. Because
you've been doing this 10 years, so
yes.
You've watched it go from one thing to another now.
Physical to digital, for sure. Yeah. And before that, I worked as a programmer for film festivals. And so it was even like, that's like reels of film, so submissions used to take really forever. People would mail in their reel or their VHS copy where you could see it and then ask for the reels of film with like all the paperwork and the check,
because they were so expensive. Reels of film were so
brutally expensive. I mean, the shipping on those things can be like $500, you know? So what happened in like late 1990s was something called Without a Box happened. That ended up getting purchased by IMDb, but ultimately it was a way to negotiate that process a little more easily. At first, it was a way to do everything online. Like your paperwork can be online, right? You can set up like the transactions online, which at the time was revolutionary.
Yeah.
Now it's like, man, that was a piece of crap. But at the time, it was revolutionary. And that was the standard, ultimately a monopoly for many years until fairly recently, 5 or 6 years ago. A Canadian company came on the scene called Film Freeway. And Film Freeway was able to take advantage of the internet as we know it now and give a platform that takes advantage of what we're used to now. Yeah. The problem with Without a Box is
Without a Box never evolved.
It never evolved.
It still felt like a 1998 web program.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was cumbersome and...
It was an agony. It was agony, especially like if you were a filmmaker coming into it now, you're like, what the hell is it? Why? Why does it look like this? Why is this so hard? And the film festival level is the same way. The only people who like really appreciated it are the ones who remembered the reels of film, like in a you're in a closet by yourself, like checking off. It was a nightmare in the past. But Film Freeway, everything is like so streamlined. Filmmakers can put their films in Film Freeway to be screened via Film Freeway. Everything is like judging is really streamlined and
because you can assign the judges directly from there. They log in.
Oh my God!
Watch the movies online from there.
It's heavenly.
So that's what you guys use now.
Oh, we've been Film Freeway exclusive for like 4 years. And partly, so there were a couple of reasons for that, because we were on Without a Box. But when I realized that Film Freeway was growing at such a pace that we weren't really losing out on submissions, we were still getting so many submissions. It's like, well, what is the real reason for staying Without a Box? Because they were expensive too. They were more expensive. Film Freeway was like, it could be free if you weren't charging submission fees. And it's super inexpensive if you decide to go exclusive. So I tried a year going exclusive and we still had we still had a free period at that time. So we had more submissions than we did this year because of that free period. Quality can range, but
more submissions does not necessarily mean better submissions.
That's correct. But when I realized, I was like, yeah, we'll go exclusive with Film Freeway. So I don't know how exciting this is going to be for your listeners to talk about the submission platform itself, but I will say this that I think can be interesting to everybody. So Film Freeway was a new player, took advantage of the internet as we know it, has had and continues at this point to still have phenomenal customer service. They're super friendly, super receptive. They get back to you right away. They apply any changes. They're very, very good. Without a Box recently, about a year ago, announced that they were going bye-bye. And that, like, for the film festival community, it was explosive news. Freaking explosive. Not that it was totally unexpected, but it was just like, well, here it is. Film Freeway's finally done it. And so there's always a little fear. It's like, okay, this like usurper has come. They eliminated their one competition.
But now that they're the monopoly, will they continue to be?
Like, how much of all that nicety was like pure Machiavellian? Like, so far though, they're still great. But
so this is what you utilize. How many submissions did you guys get this year?
This year we got over 700.
And how do you pare them down? That's a lot.
So we've got a whole crew. They're filmmakers, film critics, largely filmmakers, but we've got actors, we've got writers. So I've selected people, a lot of whom have won awards through us in the past. But they're scattered, because Film Freeway is so easy. They're all over the continent, really.
Yeah.
So I'm able to go in there and I actually assign. Now I do this randomly. I get a list of films. You can limit how many you see at a time, like 50, 100, 150, whatever. So I'll look at a batch of 50 at a time, select all, assign 2. That way I'm trying to make sure that people, one person doesn't get stuck with all features.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I've got 50 features I have to watch now. That is impossible.
I judged for you 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, I think you did.
I remember one year I was like, there's too many features in this. I don't have the time.
So that's what ends up happening is no matter what you do, it's a job, and what I'd like to do is get to the point where, we have a team that is actually working for us, that like is a family that sticks around and can get some compensation. And now that we're growing to that point, I can foresee that happening pretty soon. Our current team is great. Like, they're super hardworking, brilliant. Their notes are brilliant. I've actually ended up using some of their notes in the program magazine, just straight up quoting, because I was like, I can't say this any better.
Right.
Which, it's nice for me, because when I'm writing like the material, it's like, oh, good. I have a pool to mine from now. And then when we have our meetings, like we'll jump on Skype or Google Hangouts. And one of our first questions is like, all right, so without looking at the list, without looking at the titles or going to Film Freeway, name me some of your favorites. Because if you watch 100, 200, 300 titles in a month, and you can remember titles out of that, those are the ones that stuck with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones I want to know about.
Yeah.
And that is a really rich conversation to have. Why? Ooh, what were you thinking? And then you go in and compare that to their notes. And that has been really useful. It's been really useful to have those conversations of like, what did something to you? What gave you an emotional reaction that left you thinking about it even now 2 weeks later, where you can recall the title out of the whole list. That's one thing that's been super helpful, and because it becomes noise. I mean, it can very easily become noise. You have to, no matter what you do, you have to very intentionally focus to make this title not become noise. That's a skill set. I mean, that's something that I'm looking for in a programmer.
Right.
Is like, look, you're going to watch, 12 titles today. Or if it's features, maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah.
That's a lot. How do they not start to blend in? As soon as I feel that in myself, it's like, this is starting to all blend together. I need to stop.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's the key, because, I've done a lot of judging.
Sure.
Multiple different
Absolutely.
places. Yours and Film Week and others. And if you can only watch so many things in a day.
Yeah.
And then you have to go do something else.
Right.
Yeah.
Your brain has to have time to process what it's watched.
And it's so easy to fall into the trap of, oh God, I've got so many to watch, I just got to keep going. It's like, no. I've learned now, take the break.
Yeah.
Take the break, because that's what's more fair to the people who paid to submit.
Yeah.
And that's what will let you see these things with fresh eyes, so you're actually judging it correctly.
Yeah.
I feel that way about grading papers sometimes.
It's the same thing, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I've done editing for anthologies of short stories, and it's really very similar. Is you're looking for those things that stand out, but also you're trying to give equal attention to everything that came, and trying not to let what came before influence what you're watching now. But that can happen.
You have to process and retain a little bit.
Yes.
But if you're filling your short-term memory too fast, it just starts dumping stuff. It never makes it to long-term.
But I will say this, and this can go both ways. Sometimes, like, I've watched 12 things, and I'll start to see myself start to peter out. I was like, oh, okay, I can do one more, and I'll take that break.
But then you'll hit
that one, and it's like, oh, this is brilliant. And it's like, is it as brilliant, or is it just brilliant in comparison to the rest of my day?
Yeah.
So then I'll watch it again. It's like, and I can confirm, oh yeah, I'm going to champion this one.
Well, and then I assume like you have multiple rounds, so those ones that you thought were brilliant when held up against the other brilliant ones, it's like, okay,
that happens.
Yeah,
that has happened.
How many rounds do you guys do? You call
3.
you call it from 700 to.
The numbers are erratic.
Okay.
Yeah. I can say this as a almost universal. The short film quality is almost always better than the feature film quality. Almost always.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, I'm always more excited about the short films. That's like, man, these are so good. And it's like, the features can be a little bit rougher, It's harder.
Well, I think in the end, short films is where indie cinema thrives.
I think so too, especially genre.
Yeah.
Especially horror, even science fiction, but especially horror, there's just something about that. It's like a campfire tale.
Yeah.
That quick, we'll sit around and we'll talk about something scary. And that might not be sustainable for 90 minutes, know. And even if it is, like, wow, it really packs a punch if it's 9 minutes. There's a sweet spot of like 7 to 9 minutes. It's like something like, we have this one, I'll start to call out titles, Ulysses from Mexico. It's 5 minutes. It's without the credits, it's 5 minutes, and it's so good. It's so good. It's like, this is a film that knows exactly what length story it has, and it uses it to maximum capacity. And of course, the acting and picture and sound are all superb. That doesn't hurt. But story-wise too, like knowing your story to your length. But again, like also, there are some films that need to be longer too. So there's no like rule.
Yeah.
And
even if you're looking at the studio stuff, it's like, yeah, okay, it's a 90-minute horror film, but there's 20 minutes of actual horror. And,
totally.
70 minutes of like just standard movie fare. And I think that's the weird balance that like, if you're making a feature, you got to figure out having longer story and kind of punched short story horror moments.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like,
precisely. No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise, it just becomes gore fest. And that sort of thing.
and that can be boring, because you get immune to that. And like, if there's gore fest without like, do I care about this person who's getting
in the end, there has to be humanity.
Yeah,
you have to care about the characters.
Yeah, there was something I watched recently. I cannot for the life of me think of what it was, but at the end, I looked at John. I'm like, I didn't care. Yeah. I don't care that he's dead. There was no development where I know anything about. Shh, kill him. It's fine.
Peter Jackson's Dead Alive, or Brain Dead, as it's also known. Okay, so Peter Jackson did the Lord of the Rings movies.
Right.
He started out in splatter movies. He did a movie called Bad Taste, which is about aliens, just like absolute, just splatterific. And then he did a movie called Dead Alive. In the U.S., it's called Dead Alive. Overseas, the actual title is Brain Dead. And it's a movie about a young kind of, I will say Norman Bates type, in that he lives at home with his mom and takes care of his mom, and he's ruled by his mom. He's got a neuroses that arrives from that, but he's not like a killer, right? He's not an antagonist by any means.
Right.
His mom ends up following him on a date to the zoo and getting bit by a fictional beast called a Sumatran rat monkey. And the Sumatran rat monkey transfers onto his mother's zombieism. It's a totally absurd movie, right? Long story short, his mom becomes a zombie. He wants to hide it, so he tries to keep her at home, but of course she breaks out, starts zombifying other people. He's like, oh no, I still want to protect my mother. So he just like takes all these zombies and tries to keep them. It's an insane, over the top, wild movie. It's probably one of the bloodiest movies, if not the bloodiest movie made up to that point. But like the characters are really endearing, and so you end up like wanting to go on this journey with this guy and this woman who works at the local market who ends up becoming his love interest, and his mom, and like what's he going to do next. And you know, you need that. Like, if you don't have someone to go on the journey with, then what's the point? And you have to really kind of balance that. But man, this movie, it is insane. I highly recommend it.
He also did The Frighteners, didn't he?
He did The Frighteners. That was later. Yeah. So yeah, after Dead Alive, he did a puppet movie called Meet the Feebles.
Oh yeah.
He did the movie that really got him known in the mainstream, got him critical success, was a film called Heavenly Creatures,
right?
Which is an excellent film. Kate Winslet that's like how we know her now too.
Yeah.
And it's based on a true story about two girls who had a very unhealthy friendship and ended up murdering each other's parents. It's a very great film. And that is the birth of Peter Jackson as we know now. And then his major Hollywood film was The Frighteners with Michael J. Fox. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like Heavenly Creatures proved that he could like direct actors and actually tell really good story. And then The Frighteners was how he proved that he could do all the effects work. And then he took both of those successes and went and
Lord of the Rings.
got the Lord of the Rings.
And only because an independent film company had the faith enough to give him gajillions of dollars.
To give them everything they had.
To give them, they gambled their existence on that trilogy. Yeah. It's pretty fascinating story. Absolutely.
What is it about the horror genre specifically that has you so enamored with it?
Sincerity.
Sincerity.
Yeah. I think that...
I don't think that's a word that most people associate with it.
I don't think people think about it very much. Yeah. You know, I think that people who really care about it would agree with me immediately. So the horror, first of all, is stigmatized. It's something that that is dismissed easily. I think anything stigmatized automatically has a sort of kinship among the people who are at the source of that stigma. So, like, one really great example is I'm from Baltimore. Baltimore as a city is stigmatized. And people from Baltimore love it all the more because of that stigma. You know, it's like we have to fight you're from Baltimore, gross, you know, all the time. And that feeling, you know, that makes us love it even more. It's like you know, it strengthens that.
I'm a Californian. I got the same thing from my family from Indiana. Like, oh, you Californians.
Well, that's true. Yeah,
I wear my California with pride.
That's a very different kind of like, oh, you're one of those liberal types.
You're one of those lefties.
Lefties, yeah.
Or as my uncle always says, you come from the land of fruit and nuts. That's the one I always get anytime I go home. Even though, like, you know, I'm...
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very nice. It's very sweet.
Yeah.
Xenophobia is alive and well.
This is my, I'm sure there's lots of listeners who have those family members.
Yeah.
So we're not alone.
We commiserate.
I'm a huge sci-fi nut.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the sci-fi genre. Like, it's written off.
Sci-fi was born of horror.
Yep.
So, I mean, sci-fi as we know it, you know, if we trace roots back, it comes from anxiety. It comes from anxiety about changes that were happening because of scientific discoveries that were being made. And I mean, look at like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. You can call it, I mean, that's often called a horror novel. She was definitely writing it as a ghost story.
Yep.
But it's definitely like a birth of sci-fi.
Yeah.
It's a science fiction story.
Yeah.
Horror film, it has its roots in Gothic literature. But in the 50s and the Atomic Age, like suddenly, you know, what was once Frankenstein becomes Thing from Another World, becomes Forbidden Planet. But they were still horror movies. They were still trying to scare, but it's like suddenly, like really, you know, where we start to get science fiction as we know and love it now as kind of like an exploration, like what's the term that we use a lot that I really like? speculative fiction, right?
Yes.
Like the Jules Verne's, you know.
Right.
But even Jules Verne wrote some scary stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even within Star Trek, which is like the epitome of that
the
speculative.
Gene Roddenberry.
future,
Yeah.
like some of their best stuff is like First Contact.
Yes.
Is a straight up horror film.
Oh, yeah.
Set in space.
Well,
I mean, come on, even the Gorn, the Gorn is loved by horror fans worldwide.
Gorn is absolutely.
That's like earlier we were discussing our favorite horror films, and your partner said Alien, right? So that definitely is a little bit of horror, a little bit of science fiction. It's
a slasher in space.
Yeah.
It's true.
So they share space. They overlap a lot.
Yeah, I do love that film. It's definitely worth all the accolades it gets.
Yeah, the original Alien was so.
It's just intense.
Yeah, it was so well done.
Oh yeah, and what's great is like it could so easily have just been another cheeseball movie.
Well, he did such an amazing job of blending like gore and just straight up suspense.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a lot of that movie that's just about mood.
Most of it, I would say.
It's just about mood. And I think it progressively became more about the gore through the course of the series.
Yes,
you know? And they keep forgetting that what made it scary was just the feeling, not so much seeing the alien.
Yeah, it was more of like the what are we going to do? I think the real word is dread, right? So the difference between like dread and just, I guess, ick, you know? We talk, you'll hear what's called the jump scare a lot. And the jump scare is ultimately, you're not scared, you're startled.
Right.
You know, that's the difference. It's like, you know, but like once the jump scare or the startle is over, the boo.
Yeah.
Then you're like, wow. You look to your partner,
relief,
you're like, they got you. And then it's like, okay, yeah. It doesn't stick with you.
But those tend to be forgettable moments.
They're immediately forgettable. Yeah.
Stephen King talks a lot about this in his book on writing, because he's talking about, you know, before you know what you're facing, there's so much more dread.
Yeah.
It's the anticipation of what that creature is and the pursuit of it. Because once you open the door and it's a 10-foot tall ant bug, then you go to the rational mind and you're like, okay, how can I fix this? What can I use against it?
Yeah.
But
the fear of the unknown.
The unknown,
far stronger.
Stronger.
I mean, you got Lovecraft said that from the beginning, and
well, I think it gets back to a primal nature of us as like you know, little creatures before we became civilized in society, and we were just little clans hovering around a campfire.
Yeah,
right.
Well,
and
what's in the
can't
woods?
see 10 feet further out. You know, and any noise and any unknown thing beyond. Terrified us.
I mean, I think that's why The Witch is so good. You know, like Robert Eggers nails that feeling of, you know, being in this little house surrounded by these woods, and what is happening, like what's out there. It's dread. It's not, I am being attacked. It is, could I be attacked later? It's like, you know, when you're in the dentist, it kind of sucks, but the ride there is horrible. You know, that's how I always feel about it.
Right. What did you think of Quiet Place?
I liked it a lot. You know, there are some like little like issues with it I had. Like, you know, I saw it like around the time we had a baby, so. Not to be too spoiler heavy, but there's a birth scene in it, and I was like, man, I have to call some bullshit here. But I mean, I liked it. I like the feelings that it gave. I like the family. I was a little like, this is a little hipstery with, let's serve dinner on leaves. Like, oh, come on. But other than that, you know, some of my gripes with it are very superficial.
Yeah.
I would like to see it again. I actually have not seen it since the theater. But I really enjoyed it. I love the look of the monster, and I think the acting's great. Yeah.
I think it's interesting too that you point out that you had a baby right around the time that it came out, because so much of what's going on with a person at a given moment can affect whether they enjoy a horror film or not. You know,
or whether it's more effective. Like that, there is a scene involving the kid right at the beginning. It's like, fuck, that's far more potent now. Same with Hereditary. You know, like nothing really I'm really kind of jaded, so I'm not looking for films. I say this a lot. I'm not looking for films that scare me. I'm looking for ways that other people are expressing what scares them,
Right.
and then how can we talk about it? But Hereditary, like, made me put my hand over my mouth. You know, like, did you see Hereditary?
I have not.
Okay, there's a scene in that, and it involves a car accident that just like, wow, it fucked me up. You know,
Really?
yeah, and yeah, it's a really excellent film, really
I'll
excellent.
have to check that one
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, what's on your list of like things that people should be checking out right now?
You know, everything is so personal. Like, I've already talked about like The Witch and Hereditary. I feel like a lot of these are Get Out, obviously Us, the Jordan Peele stuff. A lot of those titles, like, they don't really need me as a bullhorn. Like, you know, they've got it. You know.
Well, here's what I would like to know. What is the first horror film you remember seeing?
So, the one there are a lot. One I like to talk about, it's not really a horror film at all, but I talk about it because it's responsible for how I define what we describe as horror. Because when I watched it, it was like with my mom and grandma, and they called it a scary movie, and I was creeped out by it, and it was really effective. And I'll always remember it's a noir film from the 40s with Humphrey Bogart called Dark Passage. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, you know,
not in years, but yeah.
Yeah, it starts off in the first person because Bogey plays a escaped convict, and halfway through the film, he ends up getting plastic surgery in order to hide his identity and stay on the lam a little easier. And after the plastic surgery, he looks like Humphrey Bogart, and now you can finally see his face. It's not in the first person anymore, right?
Right.
But there are scenes in that film. So first of all, film noir, although not really described as horror films, are lent that title film noir because they're dark. They explore the darkness. They explore the dark. Especially, they were in the era of the golden age of Hollywood, where everybody was going to musicals, you know,
right,
and happier fare. But these films were more adult. They were very much influenced by, oh my God, we just went through World War II. And they didn't necessarily have happy endings. They oftentimes didn't. And they were about people that were morally ambiguous and made terrible choices and sometimes faced the consequences of those choices in really kind of vicious ways. Dark Passage is interesting because it has arguably one of the happier endings of that. You know, in fact, a lot of people cite it as kind of a crappy film noir because its ending is really like a very Hollywood ending. You know, Bogey and Bacall end up in Mexico together and hugging and dancing and happy. Sorry for spoilers, but it's from the 40s, people.
Yeah, I think they're good at this point. Yeah.
I think the clock for that has passed.
So there's a scene where he's waiting to get plastic surgery. He's on the lam. People are after him. Paranoia is like through the roof. It takes place in San Francisco. He's on the wharf in a shitty apartment, and way off in the distance, like everything about this is great. Like the suspense is intense. The paranoia is intense. Watching the door frame, the freaking shadows from the shutters, all of those noir things. But the soundscape, like in the distance, you hear the foghorn of the wharf. You know, and everything about it is really. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. Like every horror film director should watch that as a way to see how they build that sense of just like dread and paranoia, and everything about the environment comes together and culminates in fear. And that's what I remember. I remember it's like with my mom and grandma, and they're like, yeah, we're going to watch a scary movie. And it was that. And, you know, there's a scene where he's getting the plastic surgery and he goes under, and he's got like this drug nightmare from the anesthetic it's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't watched it in years. I'm going to have to go back and watch it again.
Dark Passage, Bogey and Bacall.
So that was the first, what you consider a horror movie that you remember watching?
I was really young when I watched that. But I mean, so it's the one that seared into my brain, you know? Yeah. And at the time, I would have called that a horror movie. Yeah. And it made me want to feel that again. It made me want to, I want to like feel that again. So I would go, you know.
The joy of feeling scared.
Yeah, but feeling scared in kind of a safe way where after the movie's over, you're talking about it with your mom, your grandma, and you're asking questions as you're watching it. And, you know, I was young as a kid. I probably asked a bunch of annoying, stupid questions. But it's a thing I cherish, you know. That was the beginning of who I am now and wanting to discuss these things. It's the beginning of my love of classic film. It's the beginning of my love of like film noir and cinema in general, not just horror cinema. But also, like, you know, we tend to really put ourselves in boxes, like this is that, and this is that, and that is that. Whereas I like to, like, I'm a teacher. I like to go cross-curricular, you know. How does this fit into there? And how do we get the same? So it's less about, like, is this a horror film? And more about, like, thematically, what is this saying? You know? So that's a long-winded response.
Whitney, what was your first horror film memory?
Oh, gosh. So we were talking kind of about this. I got to watch horror films probably way too early. I was like 4. And the ones that stick out in my head are Nightmare on Elm Street. I remember having nightmares about Freddy Krueger coming to get me. Pet Sematary. I really didn't trust my cat for months after that film. And what was the one that I said downstairs?
I already read that book. I didn't bother watching the movie.
I liked the movie, but I had read the book too. The book is intense.
Yeah.
The Phantasm series. I remember that one as a kid, like,
Phantasm's so good.
Really messed me up. Yeah, I haven't watched that one as an adult, but as a kid, that was probably the most scary thing that I can remember watching. But you know, my dad and I also had a ritual of, like, I think it was on Friday nights, we would always stay up and watch Tales from the Crypt and Friday the 13th and then Star Trek. So that was our dad-kid time, you know.
That was the era of all those shows. Like, there was Friday the 13th, the series.
Yes, the series. That's what
which I loved.
Yes.
And everybody else hated because it didn't have Jason. Screw you, it's better.
It was great because it was all the haunted merchandise. But yeah,
such a good show.
Everybody, if you say that now, they're like, wait, there was no, not Jason. They just had the same name. It's different stories.
And the same logo.
And the same logo. Oh, well, that's...
I mean, it was literally it was Paramount. It was literally cashing in on, hey, we've got this property. But they made a good show out of it.
Yeah.
It lasted 3 seasons. You know, it had its run.
Warehouse 13 kind of reminded me of Friday the 13th. Similar, you know, all these
haunted
paranormal objects that have stories connected to them. So.
Right.
Yeah. You know, it's kind of an old story. You know, even like the monkey's paw, and that's where that.
They had one that was the monkey's paw.
That's right.
Episode.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we could talk. Yeah. I love those. And Tales from the Dark Side. Tales from the Dark Side.
Tales from the Dark Side.
There's an anthology.
That's a good one.
That is awesome. I still love Tales from the Dark Side, the movie. Do you remember that one, David?
Yeah, I do.
Super good. Debbie Harry was in the wraparound.
And we were talking about Cat's Eye earlier. Quicksilver Highway. Do you guys remember that?
I remember Quicksilver Highway, yeah.
There were two films in my early childhood that made me scared at home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right? And they're the 2 films that made me interested in horror long term. And one is really obvious. The second one, not so obvious.
Okay.
I'll start with the really obvious one first. It was Poltergeist.
Oh, yeah.
Poltergeist terrified the living daylights out of me. Everything in from the tree to the clown to
I had a clown doll that looked just like that.
I had a raw meat problem my entire life. I finally went vegetarian vegan a few years ago. And it felt so right.
Yeah.
You know,
but
I think it stemmed from that. I had this nasty thing about raw meat. Like, I love to cook, but like anytime I had to handle any sort of like slabs of beef, like
it's a gross thing.
It always made me just disgusted. And I take it all the way back to Poltergeist. That movie did so many psychological fucking fucked up things to my head.
So much damage.
And I love it. But then the second one, the one that made me terrified, just like wandering my house at night, was E.T.
Oh, yeah. No, you're not the only one. I've had that conversation before.
Yeah.
It's that third act scene when all those like government guys with the radiation suits arrive you see the flashlights
that
through the
didn't
sliding.
Scare me.
Really?
It was what the hell's eating the Reese's Pieces and is in the shed.
Stop.
That section terrified me as a kid. And
were you not expecting it to be the cute little alien?
I didn't know what the alien was when I went to see the movie.
Right.
Okay.
Like I saw it in the theater when they didn't tell you what an ET was.
Something's going to eat my Reese's Pieces.
So I had no idea what I was expecting.
Like, you just see the hand like...
Because I was only, 7 when that movie came out? Maybe 8. So
that's
like
funny.
My little nephew's age right now. It's like that movie really scared me. I loved it. I loved E.T. at the end. I was super happy. He's got to go home and the heart light, the whole bit.
But yeah, I guess you don't know.
But when I went home, I was terrified of like aliens coming into my house. Like if the door was left ajar at night, I would freak out.
Hide the Reese's Pieces.
You don't know if it's a good alien or a bad alien.
That's true.
You just know they're going to steal your shit.
Reese's Pieces are delicious.
But I think one of the things that I love about horror is it can slide in and slot into other genres.
Absolutely.
As elements of those tales. And I think it enhances those other stories so much when a filmmaker can bring in those elements from horror.
So one of my favorite films is called Black Narcissus. Have you seen Black Narcissus?
I haven't seen that.
It's from the 50s.
Got like a whole notebook of notes.
Yeah. It's it's a historical fiction. It's Powell and Pressburger, British film. Excellent, beautiful film. It's about a convent in Nepal, I believe, or somewhere in the Himalayas. And it really is about the folly of trying to impress your culture upon another culture. But in the end, one of the nuns, Sister Rose, goes insane. And that 10 minutes is a pure horror film. And just the way they light it and shadow it, and you see glimpses of her roaming the halls, and oh man, it's so good. Yeah. But it's not a horror. It's just that 10 minutes,
Yeah.
It's such a masterpiece. I adore it. And I think everybody should. Yeah. But again, I think it would really, and I think a lot of you hear, the people who make really good horror films see films like that. It's like, if you really want to up your craft, watch something like Black Narcissus. See how they built it there. Metropolis, the original, the silent film. There's a scene where the mad scientist is chasing her through the catacombs. I don't know if you remember that, but the whole thing is lit with this lantern. You just see her running away, and it's a horror film in that moment. It's just sort of like you're talking about it. You've got this kind of socio-political sci-fi, but it's these horror elements thrown in,
right?
And they're really that's really effective. Even what's that, 1929? Super effective.
Yeah. I mean, if you go back to Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, so much of that is it's a silent film. But even looking at it now, 100 years later, almost, it's still scary.
Yeah.
Well, it messes with you.
The message of it is still scary. The whole way through. You care about characters and you understand where they're headed and what the perils are. And it's
so good. I love
if it's really well done, they're practically timeless.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what's great about the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is it does feel timeless. It's especially if you see it the way it's meant to be seen, on a big screen with live music accompaniment. It's like a fever dream watching.
Yeah.
It. It's so. And it's brief, it's not a super long movie. It's like Nosferatu. They're both pretty short. Metropolis, the full version is super long. It's 2.5 hours.
Right.
It's long. But those ones, I can Phantom of the Opera, super good.
There are elements of the popular films that are out. And for me, in the big popular films that have come out in the last, say, 20 years, 2 Spider-Mans stand out for me. So Sam Raimi's work with Doc Ock is, especially the
Alfred
first
Molina.
time when the
That's
arms
an
are
Evil
attacking.
Dead scene.
It's beautiful.
That is actually
It's totally
the trees.
Evil Dead. It's and he brought his.
You've got the one scientist who's
he totally
nails
brought his Evil Dead experiences to that film, and it made that movie so much better.
Yeah.
right? So
I agree.
They elevated it so much.
I love that scene.
And then this most recent Spider-Man,
Far From Home,
when Mysterio starts messing with Peter's head.
Great scene.
It is straight up like, Hall of Horrors.
It's also, that made me really happy because I always kind of liked Mysterio. And I was like, oh man, I remember even saying this explicitly, like, who knows, back before any of the comic book boom, like when I was in high school. It's like, man, it's kind of a bummer that you'll never see Mysterio in a movie.
Right?
Like, no way.
First of all, the fishbowl head.
Yeah, the fishbowl head.
That's never going to play on film. Somehow it did.
Totally.
But then his powers.
Yeah. But like, I remember it's like, man, if it was a movie, like, can you imagine how cool it would be? And like, when that scene happened, I was like, this is exactly how I've always pictured it. Like, this is awesome.
I sat there going, holy crap, my comic book just came to life. This is amazing.
If you guys are psyched on that, what are your thoughts on the new Doctor Strange movie that's coming out? Because they explicitly said it's going to be like Victorian horror style, not superhero. They're going in a completely different aesthetic. But it sounds like that's something that you're all on board for. What do you?
Oh yeah, totally.
What are your expectations there?
I mean, the thing is, if you look at like the Sienkiewicz or the those old Doctor Strange from like, the psychedelic Doctor Strange from the 60s and 70s.
60s Doctor Strange.
Yeah, I think like that's what they were doing in the first place. Yeah. So it actually fits completely. I mean, he was like fighting Satan, like Mephistopheles.
Yeah. Well, I love the title of
Mephisto
of it, the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to see where they go.
I'm curious. I'll watch it. I watch all those movies.
What is it? When people come to Horrible Imaginings and come to sit down, what is it you hope they get from their experience?
I want them to see themselves and get to know each other better through movies about things that we don't like to talk about in like polite conversation. The reason I use the word sincerity at the very top of our conversation is, the thing about making these types of movies is they get, when you're going to choose dark material and you do it with sincerity, then you're really revealing something about yourself. You're in a lot of ways, even though like, horror has a kind of a reputation for being, I guess, macho or misogynistic, but like the good stuff, like the things that I like is the opposite of that. It's you're revealing something about yourself that's vulnerable that I wouldn't be comfortable talking about. I still am not comfortable talking about the fact that I run this festival when I'm like at work. It comes up and everybody's like, you do that? That's so cool. Let's talk about that some more. I was like, I kind of want to keep this separate, because it's a vulnerable thing. Like, I don't really do this for fun, although it can be fun. I feel like I'm putting myself out there, which seems like a narcissistic thing to say because I didn't make these. I'm just sharing them.
Right.
But
you're like a curator.
Yeah, I'm sharing why we chose these, and I'm sharing my reaction to them. And I do introduce them, and we do focus the Q&A on that aspect of of why, and purpose. And you can tell when watching the submissions generally when this came from something deep inside someone and wasn't just like, tits sell, blood sells. Yeah. You can tell when it's that. You can tell when it's this.
Yeah, I think you can, when you're watching good horror, it does, whether it's gory or just a suspense or whatever, there's always that, and I guess it's sincerity. There's always that sensation of the filmmaker who's putting this together right now is really opening up and showing me what scares them.
That's why I use the word sincerity. Yeah. That's why.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it comes through. Like, those are the ones that are, Night of the Living Dead is one that we still remember. It was made by blue-collar Pittsburgh people on no money. In their backyard, the producers played zombies, But, there's a sincerity there that comes through that we can all feel, that sometimes Romero himself didn't even realize he was putting on screen. But if you hear him like I've had conversations with him, and if you hear him in interviews, he's got an outlook on life that's what he put into the movie. Like Dawn of the Dead, he did it with more intention, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a political message in Dawn of the Dead about consumerism and capitalism.
Right.
Night of the Living Dead is almost naive. He's naive about what he was doing. In a way, it's just as powerful because of it.
Right.
Like, you know, you have Dwayne Jones is the lead, and Dwayne Jones got the part because he had the best audition. And young George Romero, in his blue-collar naivete, didn't change the script. He just left it as is. And that's what makes that a powerful film. Because he did not make a black character suddenly.
Right.
You know? He just let Dwayne Jones be whatever he had written, which could have easily been for a white character,
Right.
which included like slapping a white woman, you know?
Right.
Which in 1969? Yeah.
And in doing it the way he did, it became just about humanity.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that we're in the face of these zombies, we're all humans. Mm-hmm. We're all the same.
Flawed and messy.
Yeah.
But trying our hardest. Yeah. It's really powerful. Like, and again, that was like largely naive, largely unintentional, but that's what makes us remember it, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think like Dawn of the Dead's also really excellent with the intention behind it.
Right. So when is Horrible Imaginings this year?
Labor Day weekend, August 30th through September 1st.
Tickets are available?
They are so available.
And where do they go to get them?
My film festival website is Hi Film Fest. That's hifilmfest.com. That's also all our social media. So find Hi Film Fest.
I love how friendly it sounds.
Yeah.
Hi Film Fest. Yeah, that's what we like that. We're friendly on the face, and then we lead you into the darkened theater.
Well, Miguel, thank you for sitting down and chatting.
This has been fun.
Yeah.
I like getting more like philosophical and talking about what goes behind why we do these things.
Yeah. Well, you know, the one thing that I can say is in the I guess I've been hanging out and around what you've been doing for 5 or 6 years now. Every experience I've ever had with you is super positive, and having been a judge in your film festival, the care and the consideration that I know you put into these films is part of why you have the reputation you have now.
Thank you.
And you know, all the best for me on your continued success here in Orange County.
Woo-woo.
I encourage everybody to come out. I'm unfortunately out of town working this year, so I'm not going to be able to come up.
Hey, we all have to do that.
Whitney's going to come up.
Yes, we'll have Whit.
She'll cover some stuff for us while she's here.
Darn right.
Yeah.
And we'll keep spreading the word. Horrible Imaginings.
Thank you. Thank you. This was so fun.
Yeah. Thank you for the interview.
Thank you. Yay, I'm starving.
Right?
Hello there, citizens. I am the terror that flaps in the night. I am the floaty that will not flush no matter how many times you try in the toilet bowl of crime. I am Darkwing Duck, telling you please, talk hard and enjoy the mindgasm. Whatever the heck that means. After all, you are watching Intellectual Podcast with your ears.